We begin the current Daf Masechta Shabbos Daf Yudches. Begin 4 lines down at the top of the Amud, where we begin the Gemara explaining the halacha of the previous Mishnah. Our share is co-sponsored by Kahal Zich and Yecheskel, Torah Anytime Daf Achaim. We thank everyone joining us live on Zoom, and the learning of the Torah should be a refuah shleima for Chayli Yisrael and a schus for everyone learning the Daf Yomi, and part of this chabur, all chaburas, and Gans Klal Yisrael. Some of the ideas we're going to speak about in today's Daf is putting ingredients together is considered to be the malacha of kneading on Shabbos, even though one of the lamas of malachas is lush, is kneading. Even if you don't knead it necessarily, even if you just put it together and it then congeals together, that might be the malacha of lush. We're also going to discuss regarding, which was the topic of our Mishnah, beginning a process that will continue into Shabbos. So although one's doing it on Erev Shabbos, but that when it continues on to Shabbos Kodesh, that if that's permitted or that's forbidden. Additionally, we're going to speak about Shemichata with a hay, that even if, let's say, like we'll see in Beis Hillel, even if there's no concern of Shvisas Kalim, there might be a problem about leaving something on the fire to cook on Shabbos. What's the problem? Beis Hillel holds you allowed to start the activity before Shabbos. We'll see that there's another, which is a common halacha we know when we put on the blech, we might come to stoke the coals to heat it up more, and therefore one's not allowed to leave something on the fire from before Shabbos. Additionally, we're going to speak about one should not sell to a non-Jew on Friday unless he has enough time to take it home before Shabbos, which is machlekes b'sham Beis Hillel, how far away he must be able to take it from the time Shabbos starts. So our Gemara begins, Daf Yudches and Aleph, 4 lines down at the top of the Amud. We begin the Gemara part of our previous Mishnah. The Gemara asks the following question, because it's coming to explain the halacha of the Mishnah. Again, basically the theme of the Mishnah was, which we were continuing, this is really the beginning of the Masechta Shabbos, we're speaking about the laws of Erev Shabbos. We had a huge machlekes b'sham Beis Hillel. What are you allowed to do Erev Shabbos that then is going to continue on to Shabbos? So the first item mentioned is now up for the discussion of the Gemara right now. Says the Gemara like this: Mantan, who's the time of the Mishnah? That nesines mayim lediyoi, putting water into the ink, even though you're not kneading it, you're not mixing it like a dough, mixing it together. Zuhi shriyas, and this considered soaking, meaning that's it's kneading, and therefore you're going to be liable for the malacha of lush, because the Mishnah is not talking about kneading. It's just talking about the first halacha the Mishnah said was b'shami oimrim ein sharon diyoi. You're not allowed to soak ink unless it was soaked from before Shabbos, and Beis Hillel says it's permitted. So we have their machlekes regarding Erev Shabbos if you're allowed to do this. But the inference is that on Shabbos, if you do it, and that's why we're going to debate if you're allowed to do it Erev Shabbos, if you did on Shabbos, you'd be chayav achatas. Who is the time of the Mishnah that holds that by just putting in the water, which now it's soaking and it's a congealing together, that's considered the malach of lush? Because that we Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both have to agree to that concept, and then the machlekes says, okay, could you do it on Erev Shabbos? So Rabbi Yosef says Rebbe, it's like Rebbe. Because the time that we learned in the Bryce, it's a machlekes if that's considered lush or not. Echad nois nesakemak, like the picture we have on the slide. One person puts the flour. The echad nois nesamayim, the other one just puts water. So achron chayiv. The last one's going to be liable because of lush, which is av malacha. That's Rabbi Rebbe, because ultimately, if you put water into flour, it's going to turn into a dough. So you're doing lush without mixing it with your hands. So therefore, you see, he's the time of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yisrael, or that has the gear says Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda, he says, no, you're not chayav for lush until you actually go ahead and knead it together, even though it congeals, you didn't do the malacha of lush. So therefore, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yisrael wants to say the time of our Mishnah must be like Rabbi. And then Abai says to him, no. But Dilma, maybe I could tell you, Ad kan lekam Rabbi Yisrael, where do we find Rabbi Yisrael that says this halacha that you have to do an actual act of kneading? Ela bekemach, that's only with flour. Why? The bar gibelhu. Flour is something that you could knead. So therefore, to be considered in the malach of lush, you have to actually go ahead and knead it together. But ing, the lav bar gibelhu, which it's not something that you could knead. It's a liquid. You can't knead it even if you want to. I would tell you that Rabbi Yisrael would agree that yes, by ink, which is the halacha of our Mishnah, would be considered kneading even without actively kneading it, even just by putting in the water. How do you know that the time of the Mishnah is like Rabbi and not like Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda? Says Rabbi Yosef, no. You cannot entertain to say that Allah of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yosef. Because the Tanya, I'll prove to you from a Brisa. Why? The Brisa says, if one person puts in the ashes to mix it into a mixture, which that's not something that could be kneaded. Ashes is try to mix ashes and water. It's not going to turn into a solid. So one person puts in the ashes, one person puts in the water. Rebbe says it doesn't make a difference. You don't have to actually make a kneading. As long as the person that puts it into the water, he's going to be chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Achi Gabel. No, he says until you actually knead it together. So you see, even though something that's not a bar gibel, something that cannot be kneaded, still we find Rabbi Yehuda holds you only chayiv if you do an act of kneading. So you see that no, our Mishnah, even like the case of Diyai, where we're saying you're liable just for putting in the water, even though it's not a kneadable thing, is not like Rabbi Yehuda. To which Abai responds, he says, no. But Dilma, my Afer, maybe what does the Brisa mean when it's talking about Afer with an aleph, which is ashes? Maybe really means, where sometimes the words can be interchangeable, it means offer, it means earth, which is the bar gibahu. It's something that could be needed. Sometimes they would take earth, they would make it like muddy for building, where they would make a building out of that. So therefore, it is a bar gibel. Maybe that's where Rabbi Yehuda requires that you have to knead it. But if it's really ashes, then since like the halach of our Mishnah of like Diyai, he would hold, no, you'd be liable just for putting in the water. How do you know? It's just like Rabbi, not Rabbi Yehuda. To which Rabbi Yosef responded, he says, how can you say that the Afer means offer? But by the time we have two different brises. We have one brise that says Afer, ashes, with an aleph. By the time we have another brise that says offer with an ayin, that it's earth. So if you have two brises, one's Afer, one's offer, obviously the one with the aleph is obviously referring to ashes. And still it's saying, even though it's not something that can be needed, still Rabbi Yehuda says, you're not going to be chayav, you're just putting in the water. So you see Tam Mishnah is not like him. To which Abai answers, he says, no, midi gabe adodi tanya. Were these two brises necessarily said together by the same author? No, one brise was taught by Rabbi Chia, which those are the two redactors of the brises, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shia. One was taught by Rabbi Chia, one was taught Rabbi Shia. One taught offer with a ayin, one taught offer with an aleph. But really both of them are talking about offer regarding earth, and therefore again, we don't have a raya. Abai wants to say that the time of Mishnah could be even like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not chayav just for putting in the water. That's by something like by either offer, earth, or by flour, dough, where you could knead it, then you're not going to chayav until you knead it. But like the case of Afer, or the case of our Mishnah, which is ink, which you can't knead even if you want to, go ahead and mix it, it's not going to be able to knead it. Basically, would agree to the halach of the Mishnah that if you were sharid Diyai and Shabbos, even just putting in the water, you'd be chayiv, and therefore the time of the Mishnah could even be like Rabbi Yehuda. Now we continue. We'll learn the Brisa. Continue on this theme. The whole theme of our Mishnah is regarding starting a forbidden activity on Erev Shabbos and continuing into Shabbos. This is halacha lamaisis. We'll learn the Brisa. Pleiskin mayim. A person could open up a channel of water, ligina, to a garden, meaning to say you open up this small little channel from the edge of the spring, and you open it up so that it could flow into the garden. You could do that Erev Shabbos and Chashecha, Friday, when it's before it gets dark. And all Shabbos can be doing the malacha of zereya, of watering the planting and growing. It doesn't make a difference. You could start it, and this is where the big discussion that we mentioned, I think, on previous stuff regarding the Shabbos clocks, where you start something Erev Shabbos and it's going to be doing malachas, your kalim, your things, all Shabbos. Says the Brisa, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to open up the spring and go ahead and create a channel going and watering the garden the whole Shabbos, like the sprinklers. You could have it go the whole Shabbos. So too, the Brisa goes through many different halachas. Umenichin mugmer, you're allowed to put. They would take these like frankincense, and they would take types of incense, and they would put it on the fire, on coals. Tachas hakelim, you could puld it beneath the person's clothing, and they would have the clothing get smoked so that it should have a good aroma. And you could go ahead and you could make the perfuming of the garments the whole Shabbos. So too, umanichin gafris tachas hakelim, you could put sulfur beneath the silver vessels, which what they would do is they would make like flowers or different forms with the stylus carving into the silver, and then they would smoke with sulfur and they make it dark and recognizable, so that make the images on the silver vessels beautiful. So you could do that, whether we're goris by all these parentheses or not, but it's all the same idea. Erev Shabbos and Chashecha, umeskafa v'hochen kala Shabbos kula, and it can become sulfurized and go the whole entire Shabbos. Again, as long as you started before Shabbos, it could do the malacha on Shabbos. So to manichin kiler, you're allowed to put what's called kalirim, which is a type of an ointment, al gabi ayin on the eye, or vispalonis, which is a type of a bandage, a dressing, al gabi marka on the wound, Erev Shabbos mechashecha, umeshapes v'arlechas kalim kuli, and it could get healed the whole entire Shabbos, meaning the refuah could be happening, which is forbidden to be done on Shabbos. You could start it before Shabbos and it continue happening throughout Shabbos. Now, those are all permitted. But, says the Brisa Aval, and this is going to be the discussion of the Gemara to understand the contrast. Aval ein noisen chitin l'teicher rechaim shalmayim, but you're not allowed to put wheat into a water mill, which Rashi says for sure a hand mill, because obviously you can't be grinding by hand, or even those that were turned by an animal, like by a donkey, because the person is commanded regarding what's called shvisa behemta. Your animal is not be doing malach on Shabbos. An explicit pasuk, So we're saying even a watermill, you're not allowed to put the wheat in from before Shabbos and have the mill continue going and grinding. Only if it would be grinded from before Shabbos. But if it's going to be grinding on Shabbos, then it's forbidden. So says my time, what's the reason? Why is the wheat in the mill any different than all the other cases before? You said you're allowed to do an activity that starts and then does the malach all Shabbos. Why is this case different? So Amar Rabbi says, the reason is because it makes noise, which is actually a big halacha l'maisa that's brought down many times in the Paiskim. The two terminologies Rashi says are often quoted, what's called avshem milsa, it makes noise, and also therefore that's what's called in halacha the concept of zilusa. It's disgraceful. A lot of things on Shabbos, the contemporary Paiskim, you find bring this concept down, it's disgraceful. You cannot be doing this activity on Shabbos. The noise factor, it's avshem milsa, it's not Shabbostic. Those are the words people use many times when they're referring to this halacha. It makes noise, and you're going to be having this thing, like the whole company is working on Shabbos. That's not appropriate. Therefore, that's forbidden. Now, Rabbi Yosef says to Rabba, why doesn't the master say Mishum Shvisas Kalim? Why do you have to make up, as Tais explains, why do you have to make up this reasoning of that making noise? Whoever heard of this as reason to be forbidden? Why didn't you say the reason why it's forbidden in the case of the watermill is because your kalim, your vessels, your utensils have to be idle and also not do malach on Shabbos? Because the Tanya learned the Braisa that's forbidden. Pasuk says in Shemais, it says, the previous pasuk there says, Laman Yenuach, Shorcha, V'Chamorcha, it's talking about what has to rest. Not only you, talking about your ox and your donkey. And then the pasuk says, Uv'chol asher marti lechem, and regarding everything that I said to you, Tishmeru, you should safeguard, you should take heed. What's Uv'chol? Says the Brais L'Rabish Shvisas Kalim, that comes to include the resting of your utensils. So therefore, says Rabbi Yosef to Rabbah, why are you making up the reason Hashmos Kol? Just say the reason is because of Shvisas Kalim. But as Taisus points out, Rabbah held that actually even Beishamai, that's the stringent opinion, he does not hold of the halacha Shvisas Kalim. Therefore, he didn't agree to Rabbi Yosef. He holds the reasoning Beishamai, which is an important concept to bring out. Why did Beishamai in our Mishnah say all these things are forbidden Erev Shabbos? Not because, and these are the two primary reasons in our sugya. According to Rabbi Yosef, the reason why it's forbidden, even though you started before Shabbos, because your kalim are going to be doing the work for you on Shabbos. You cannot start something before Shabbos, even though you're not doing it, but your kalim are doing it. The Rabbah held that the reason of Beishamai, and that's why he didn't say the interpretation like Rabbi Yosef, is because if we let you do it before Shabbos and be doing it on Shabbos, you might come to do it on Shabbos. Because hey, if you can have, that's the discussion they're placing up with Shabbos clock, if you could have stuff going on and off and this and that, you might come to do it yourself. And therefore that's why Beishamai is saying I'll do it in Erev Shabbos. We just brought a Bryce that says a halach of Shvisas Kalim. So that's what Taish explains, that Rabbah held that Beishamai only holds Shvisas Kalim as a problem where there's an activity being done. Your watermill is doing an actual activity, which we're going to shortly discuss that concept, if it's doing an action or not. But when the keli is not doing it, it's totally passive. Like the halachas of our Mishnah, the kelim are passive. They're just holding the thing that a malacha is being done, but it's not actually doing the malacha. That Beishamai even did not hold that that's forbidden, and therefore that's where Rabbah did not agree to Rabbi Yosef. But that's where Rabbi Yosef, he does hold like that, and therefore he asks on Rabbah. He says, why do you make up the reason they should Mishma is called? Just say the reason is because of Shvisas Kalim. So therefore he disagrees. He says, Elama Rabbi Yosef, he says, what's the understanding of this brisa? Why is it forbidden to go ahead and have the watermill grinded? Not because it's making noise the way Rabbah said it, rather Mishma Shvisas Kalim. It's because simply your keli is doing the malacha. It's going to be grinding it on Shabbos. Your kalim cannot be doing a malacha. So says the Gemara as follows. Now, now that you, Rabbi Yosef, said that li Beis Hillel, according to Beis Hillel, which this is an important concept. Obviously, this brisa that we're discussing is going like Beis Hillel. Why? Look at the first cases. All the cases you spoke about. That you could open up the channel of water from before Shabbos and they could go the whole Shabbos. You could leave the incense and the perfume beneath on the coals, and they could sulfurize and they could perfume it the whole Shabbos. All those cases in our Mishnah, Beishamai were saying they're forbidden. You're not allowed to start them before Shabbos. Beis Hillel was saying that you are allowed to. So obviously, from the Reisha of this brisa that we're quoting, we're going like Beis Hillel. Now the thing is, but then the last case of the brisa says that by the watermill is going to be forbidden. Why is it forbidden, as we're saying? Because of Rabbi Yosef says, because of Shvisas Kalim. So says the Gemara to Rabbi Yosef, now that you said according to Beis Hillel, Islu Shvisas Kalim Dairaisa, that he holds that Shvisas Kalim is biblical. So then, how do we understand the following cases? How do we understand Gafris regarding the case of sulfur, Umugmur regarding the case of spices, and regarding all the other cases of our Mishnah, my time was sharu, then why do you say that it's going to be permitted? In other words, by mugma, the incense, you put it into a type of like a bowl, and it comes out that the kli is doing a malacha. We just said the brisa. You said that you're allowed to do activity to start from before Shabbos. You're not concerned about that you start a malacha from before Shabbos and continue into Shabbos. Fine. But the problem is, you said at the Sefer that, and we're saying this brisa is basil, you're saying that, but the watermill, that's forbidden. Why? Rabbi said it because of making noise. Fine, that's a totally different halacha. But according to Rabbi Yisrael, he said the reason is because of Shvis is Kalim. Your keli, your milk cannot be doing malacha beyond Shabbos. Okay, so why all the other cases B'Yisrael hold are permitted? What's, let's say, mugmer? You put the incense in the bowl and it's perfuming your clothing the whole Shabbos. That's a malacha. Your keli is doing the malacha. How is that permitted? That should be forbidden. How does B'Yisrael say that they're permitted? Says the Gemara, because the vessel didn't do any maisa, any action. It's just laying on the ground, and the coals are inside, and the incense is inside. In contrast to the case of the mill is turning, the mill is doing an action. Now, whereas according to Rabbi Shloimy that he holds it's forbidden, even if it's placed inside, he holds that's considered that the kli is doing a malacha. But Beis Hill is saying that no, it didn't do any action. So therefore, the cases that we have in the Mishnah, as we're going to discuss each one of them, they didn't do a malacha. Says the Gemara, wait a second. So like we continue to ask, what's with Einin Shel Pishtan? What's with the bundles of flax that we mentioned in the Mishnah? My time is sharu. Why is that permitted? Where, as Taisa explained, why is the Gemara picking that case, let's say, from all the other cases of the Mishnah? Well, let's say when you have the ink or the dyes or the veg, all of them are in vessels too. Why is the Gemara asking specifically from the bundles of flax? So Taisa explains because no, by all those cases, it's this, obviously the same thing as we just answered. The kli is not doing a mice at all. It's inside the kli, but the kli is not doing an action like a mill which is turning. But whereas by the bundles of flax, that the oven is doing somewhat of an action because it's heating up the bundles of the flax. And also, by the other cases, it didn't mention a kli. Yeah, obviously there's a kli when you're soaking the ink. Obviously it's in a vessel, and it's your vessel. But it doesn't mention explicitly. But by the case of the bundles of flax, it mentions l'toy chataner. So it mentions a kli, so we ask it on that case. Say, wait a second. There it's also doing a malacha, and you're saying that Beis Hill agrees to the controversy of Shvis Kalim. Says the Gemara, no, here also mishum deloy oven ma'isa. No, the oven's not really doing an action. It's just sitting over there. It's getting heated up. It's having the malacha malabin done to the bundles of flax inside, but the oven's not doing anything. It's completely passive. So therefore, Beis Hill does not hold that's going to be a problem, a violation of Shvis Kalim. Again, in contrast to the case of the watermill, the watermill is actually, the mill is turning. It's doing an action. That's where he holds a Shvis Kalim. But the Gemara continues that, wait a second, the next one's really difficult from the halacha of the Mishnah. Mitzudas chayav v'oivadagim, the traps of the wild animals and the birds and the fish. The ka'avin ma'isa, that obviously does an action because when you have a trap, it gets knotted and it grabs the bird. So to any trap, when the wild animal goes into there and its feet get stuck, then suddenly the trap jumps and connects on the other side and it traps the animal. That's an action being done by your kali, by your trap, and yet still that's one of the cases, my time is sharu. Why do Beis Hill in the Mishnah say that's permitted? Because, you set up from before Shabbos, even though not necessarily going to trap from before Shabbos, but why? Didn't you tell me that Beis Hill agrees to Shvis Kalim and the kali is doing an action? So Hasam Nami says, no, they're also interesting. Listen to the Gemara how it says. It's talking about beleiche. Let's say by catching the fish, it's talking about a fish hook, where the fish swallows the hook and they get stuck on it. But the kli of the fisherman is not moving from its place at all. It's staying in one place. So that it's not doing an action. And so to the kukri, where they would make this type of a basket, there was this funnel shape, where one end was wide, and the one end was narrow, and basically is that when the fish swims in, it's wider on one end, so it's able to go in. But then when it keeps on going, it comes into a narrow end at the other end. So, but it's a little bit supple. It's able to stick its head out. But once it's trying to get its head back, but it can't go any further because it narrows. So then when it tries to get its head back in, then the reeds at the edge, the twigs that are sticking out at the ends, go into his jaw, and then the fish is stuck. But the capture of the fish was not doing any action, the loy kaven ma'isa, and that's why it's going to be permitted. Because yes, Beis Hill holds the Shvis Kalim, but only when there's an action being done. That was the interpretation according to the Rav Yosef. But now it says the Gemara v'hashtam Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, that he says that actually Mantana, who is the Tana of the Brisa, that talks about the prohibition of the watermill to be running on Shabbos because it's Shvis Kalim, the Raisa, that it's a biblical violation of your Keli actually doing an action. that actually Beis Shammai he, and therefore must be the case of the watermill that's forbidden is Beis Shammai, and V'loi Beis Hillel, and not Beis Hillel. Now, as we're going to shortly explain, Beis Shammai does not differentiate between whether you're doing an action or you're not doing an action, because as we see in the halacha of our Mishnah, he holds all the cases of the Mishnah are forbidden, even though you started from before Shabbos, unless you had time for it to be done from before Shabbos. One of the cases was, let's say, Unan Shal Pishtan, the bundles of flax, where there's no action being done, and still Beis Shammai says that's going to be a violation of Shvisas Kalim. So therefore, says the Gemara, since we're saying who's the one that says Shvisas Kalim, Dairaisa is only Beis Shammai, so it comes at Lib Beis Shammai, according to Beis Shammai, as we see from the halacha of the Mishnah, Bein Kavod Ma'isa, Bein Did Lo Kavod Ma'isa, whether the Kli is doing an action or not doing an action, also it's forbidden. Beis Shammai does not allow your Kli to be an accomplice for a malacha being done on Shabbos. Beis Hillel, and this actually the halacha l'maisa, that avagav the ka'avad ma'isa, even though an action is being done with your Kli, shari, it's going to be permitted. Beis Hillel does not agree to this concept that it's going to be forbidden. Now, as the Poskim, as Tosfos talks about, it might still be that the watermill might be forbidden, because as Rabbah says, because of the fact that it makes noise. It's Av Shemilsa. But regarding all these other concepts about the Kli doing something, we don't care. My Kli, my lights, my air conditioner, all those things could be doing malacha for me on Shabbos. That's not a problem. Now, but says the Gemara, the Hash the Amrit. But now that you're saying, according to Beis Shammai, even though you don't do an action, that Aser, it's going to be forbidden, which, just to point out, places on Amid Beis, he points out just an important concept regarding the halacha of the Mishnah, the symmetry of the Mishnah, that although we have many cases in the Mishnah, the Beis Shammai disagrees with Beis Hillel, they're all really one concept. Can you start something Erev Shabbos, that's going to continue on Shabbos? But Tosfos points out, and this is based on what the Gemara is saying at this point, that there's different cases in the Mishnah to understand the halacha of Beis Shammai. That now that we're saying that the reason Beis Shammai is because Shvisas Kalim, the first three cases of the Mishnah, not to soak the ink and the dyes, which is one case, the bundles of flax, and the traps, those are all because of Shvisas Kalim. Because the malacha is being done in the Kli, and it comes that the Kli is doing the malacha. As we said, Beis Shammai holds that's a problem even if it's not doing an action. It's a problem with Shvisas Kalim. But the next case is the Mishnah of, let's say, selling to a non-Jew, or giving your hides to a tanner, or giving your clothing to the launderer. Those are not because Shvisas Kalim. As Tosfos explains a nice svara, he says, the fact that your hides are being tanned is not the leather doing the malacha. The one who's tanning is doing the malacha. So too, when your garments are being laundered, the one who's laundering is doing the malacha. Not your garments are not having a malacha. The fact that a malacha is being done with it is not considered that your kelim are doing a malacha. Beis Shammai would not say it's forbidden for that. The reason why Beis Shammai says they're forbidden is because the tanner or the launderer, the cleaners, that they're going to look like that they're your agent. And therefore also the case of what we're going to discuss right now regarding the mugmer and the gophers, the Gemara is going to explain this tumah that it was on the ground. So what do you mean? What is the help on the ground? Your clothing are being incensed and being dyed. That's not a problem of Shvisas Kalim, like we said, because Shvisas Kalim is only the malacha that it's being done in it, not being done to it. So therefore that wouldn't be a violation. But those are the cases according. So now it says the Gemara, just to continue to understand the theme of the Mishnah, now that you're saying that the halacha of Beis Shammai is because he holds as the problem of Shvisas Kalim, even there's no action being done to it. See, if that's the case, so the Gemara continues on the base and says that mugmer v'gafres. So let's say regarding spices, which is beneath the clothing, v'gafres, or the sulfur beneath the silver vessels, my time is shor Beis Shammai. Why does Beis Shammai say it's permitted to do that, which everyone would do that in Talmudic times? But the problem is, but the spices and the sulfur are in the vessels. Beis Shammai holds even if it's not doing an action, it's forbidden. How could you have that being done throughout Shabbos? Says Hasam over there, manach, the mugmer and the gafers are placed a'ara on the ground. They're not in a vessel. So therefore there's no problem about Shvisas Kalim. And therefore Beis Shammai says it's not a forbidden activity. But now the Gemara asks something that everybody does. Gigas. Let's say the barrel that the beer is inside of it, where you can't spill it on the ground. You can't say it's mancha a'ara. You can't make beer on the ground. So the barley is soaking all Shabbos. And because to make beer you have to soak at least more than 8 days, and that includes Shabbos. Well, let's say vener. A lamp, where, of course, Beis Shammai has to have that you have a lamp lighting on Shabbos. How could you have a lamp lighting on Shabbos? It's in a vessel. Or a kedera, let's say a pot, that's on the stove, where it's not possible that it's not going to be cooking and what's called mitztamik, that's getting better on Shabbos, so there's a malacha being done with it. Or v'shafud. Or let's say you have a spit, which is like the shish kebab, that's in the oven. As the Mishnah teaches later on the next daf, Yitesef Beis, that you're allowed to lower the korban pesach on the spit, and Beis Shammai does not disagree to that. My time is shor Beis Shammai. Why does Beis Shammai say it's permitted? But you cannot have your kli, even in a passive way, being part and parcel of a malacha being done on Shabbos. How are you allowed to do all these things according to Beis Shammai? Says the Gemara, the mafkulu hafkur. According to Beis Shammai, you have to say that he declares these vessels ownerless. So then he's not commanded anymore on their doing malacha, because it's not his keli. That you have to say according to Beis Shammai, because according to Beis Shammai, then you now have a lamp, you now have a stove, you now have anything on Shabbos, because your keli is part of a malacha. So you have to say it was mafkir. Now the Gemara continues and says, Mantan al hadatan rabban. Based on everything we set up until now, regarding that we divided Bisham Basil in the schools of Shvisas Kalim or not, we said Basil holds there's no problem with Shvisas Kalim, even if it's doing an action. Bisham says there is a problem, even if it's not doing an action. Who does the following breza go like? Which says like this: L'tamali isha kedera, a woman that should not fill up a pot of asasiyos v'tumasin, which are certain types of beans, which really have to be cooked for a long, long time. V'tanich l'teich hatan. The woman should not fill up this pot of these beans and put it into the oven, Erev Shabbos Mechashicha, Friday afternoon, right before it gets dark. And the reason for that is because it takes a long time, and we're concerned, as we'll see, what's this problem. But for now, we're just going to say that's forbidden. V'minasanan, if she did this, and we're saying you're not allowed to, so the Matzah Shabbos is Matzah Shabbos, this is going to be forbidden, Bechdei sheyasu, which means the amount of time it takes that you should have cooked these beans. This is a well-known halacha regarding malacha that was done on Shabbos. We'll see at length in the sugya of Amir La'akam. We don't want you to have benefit from malacha that was done on Shabbos, and therefore this, which was done prohibitedly, because we don't want you to put this in the oven Erev Shabbos, as we'll see shortly why that is. But if you violate it, then you're not going to have the benefit of it cooked the whole Shabbos. You're going to have to wait the amount of time after Shabbos, how much it would have taken to cook it had it not cooked on Shabbos. Similarly, and these are both halacha lamaises. L'yimali nachtem. A baker should not fill up a barrel of water, and put into the oven. Erev Shabbos Friday afternoon, right before it gets dark. You're not allowed to do that. If you did this, the Matzah Shabbos is going to be forbidden. The amount of time it takes to have heated up that water, which the baker needed for making his breads, you have to wait that amount of time on Matzah Shabbos too. Says the Gemara, let's say these brises, which we know halacha l'ma'ases, are like Beis Shammai, not like Beis Hillel, because who's the one that says, I'll do something right before Shabbos because of Shvisas Kalim? Because your keli, the oven or the pot, are going to be doing malach on Shabbos. That's Beis Shammai, not Beis Hillel. So the Gemara introduced a new concept, which is important halacha. Says the Gemara, Philatem and Beis Hillel, we could even say it's going like Beis Hillel, but for a different reason. Gzeir in this halacha l'maisa shem yechata begachalim, because you might come to stoke, to stir the coals, to go ahead and have it cook a little bit quicker. Which, as Taisa points out, even though, what do you mean? You have so much time for it to be heated up the whole Shabbos, we're still concerned that it might cool off, and therefore you might come to stir the coals, is because they used to make these things, let's say the beans or the water, on a low flame, because they don't want it to either disintegrate, to dissolve, or to get burned. So therefore, since it's on the low flame, it might start ebbing out, and you might come to stir the coals on Shabbos, because you're going to see, what's happening? You keep on checking in. How's the chalm doing? How's doing that? You might come to stir the coals. This is the well-known halacha, as we're going to see later on regarding the laws of Bishul on Shabbos. That's why we have a blech. We're concerned of you might come to stir the coals, and therefore we said, no, you can't put this thing Erev Shabbos right before on the fire, because whole Shabbos is cooking. You keep on looking at it and say, wait a second, how's that water? I need that for Matzah Shabbos. You might come to stir it. Therefore, you're not allowed to do it. And therefore, if you did it, we're going to say it's asur b'chdei sheyasa. So now the Gemara continues on this theme. Now that we introduced this concept of that Beis Hillel holds that there are going to be certain cases that are forbidden, even though it's not a problem at Shvisas Kalim, it's a problem because you might come to stir the coals. What do you do with some of the cases we mentioned in the Mishnah? Mugma regarding the incense, the guffers, and the sulfur, nami ligzer, the Yeshua doesn't make exer. What happens is you told me right before Shabbos, you're allowed to put the coals beneath either the silver kalim or beneath the clothing, and they could go ahead and sulfurize it, or could go ahead and incense it throughout Shabbos. But why aren't you concerned that he's going to see, it's starting to ebb out, he might come to stir the coals that it should make a good smell for his clothing? Says Gemara, no, hasam loy machtilu. There he's not going to stir the coals. The machti, if he would stir it, salik bo kutra, it actually would make smoke come out of the wood, which that would darken the clothing from the soot, and the smoke of the wood is vakashalu, it's harmful for it. And the same thing is by the guffers. If you're going to go stir it, it's going to make this big plume of smoke come out, and it's going to ruin the clothing. So a person would not come to stir the coals by the case of the clothing and regarding the silver. But then the Gemara continues asking, well, what do you do with udan shel pishtan, with the bundles of flax? Nami ligzer, there you also make the gzeira. Why are you allowed to put in the oven right before Shabbos and it's heating up? You might come to stir the coals. So the Gemara, no, hasam over there, as this is also halach lamaisa. Kiven, and this is important in general for whatever is applicable for this concept, Kiven the kashlu zika, since the wind is harmful for the flax, it would ruin the linen, it would ruin the flax if a wind comes in, so he's not going to uncover it from the seal of the opening of the oven. So we don't have to be geyser that you might come to mechata b'gechol, because you would have to open up the oven to stir the coals underneath. You're not going to open up the oven. Because if you open up the oven, the wind, the draft that would come in would ruin the flax, and therefore we're not concerned over there either about shemi echata. So the Gemara continues asking, well, what's with semelier, another one of the cases of the Mishnah, putting wool into the vat, which they would wanted that the dye should be absorbed and you could let it soak the whole Shabbos. Ligzer, there you should be geyser that you might come to stir the coals. So Mashmuli says we're talking about b'yoyra akura. We're talking about by a vat that was removed from the fire, and therefore there's no problem about stirring the coals. The case of the Mishnah was talking about specifically if you removed it from the fire, so it's not on the coals. So but another concern, which is also well known in the halachas of bishul, v'nechashem megispa. But okay, so it's not on the fire. But if you're concerned about someone, let's say, trying to make the heat a little bit more on Shabbos, but you should be concerned that maybe he's going to stir it. And regarding cooking, that's considered cooking. If you have things that are not fully cooked, you take the chalent of the pot. We've heard many times here between Mincha and Ma'ariv that Rabbi Rosenblum regarding the halachas of bishul, that even megis, even just mixing, is a problem because it's not fully cooked. By mixing it, you made it into bishul. Or as Tais actually says, he says the problem in this case of megis would be that it would be dyeing it because we're waiting for it to be absorbed. You mixed it, you're making the dye come in, that's the malach of tzeveya. But either way, why are we not concerned for that? If you're concerned for these ideas of shemi echata, you should be concerned about mixing it. Says the Gemara, and there's also the halacha l'maisa. You have to have also, we're talking about be'akura, it's removed from the fire, vitucha. And it's also sealed, meaning it's covered with its covering and it's like cemented around with such an effort to go ahead and break off the seal, open it up. A person's going to remember by that point, and therefore that's why it's permitted, because A, it's off the fire, so you're not going to be mechata. But you're right, if it's on the fire, we would have the concern. And also, it's sealed, and therefore you're not going to come to open it up to make it up, because by the time you're trying to break it up, you say, hey, wait a second, it's Shabbos, I'm not allowed to do this, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Now the Gemara continues and says, we have some halacha l'maisis now regarding the laws of bishul, based on the concept we were just talking about before. The Hashdam Amar, now that the master said, that even according to Beis Hillel, those previous halachas are going to be forbidden. Because you might come to stir the coals, which, like we said, putting the pot of beans before Shabbos, we said according to Beis Hillel, it's not really a problem. It's only a problem because you might come to stir the coals. So we have the following interesting halacha l'maisa. Hai kidra chaisa. If you have a pot of raw meat, and this is important, like for the laws of bishul regarding a blech, if not. A pot of raw meat, shari la'anucha, it's permitted to go ahead and place it. In other words, to do what's called shehiyah, which we're going to talk about in a later bletter, which is regarding leaving something on the fire from before Shabbos. Let's say what we call without a blech. You're allowed to leave it Erev Shabbos im chashecha b'tanur, right before it becomes dark, in the oven, and it's going to go ahead and cook the whole Shabbos. My time, what's the reason? Why aren't you concerned of shemi chata? You know why? Even though since it's not fit for that night meal, this is totally raw. You're not eating this on tonight. That chant is not going to be edible tonight for the meal. Which again, the place I'm talking about actually in today's times where our stuff cooks so fast that actually even totally raw things could be, I'm not talking about in the practical halacha l'maisa, but in the conceptual idea, it's not going to be fit tonight. So some person's going to remove his thought about it. He's not even looking at it to say, oh, is it ready? Is it not ready? So he's not going to come to go ahead and stir the coals, because for sure if it's totally raw, he's not intending to eat it that night, and he's going to leave it over there. And what's with tomorrow? No, for tomorrow he's not going to stir it because he has the whole night for it to cook. You wake up in the morning, the geschmack chant, it's already cooked. And therefore it's not similar to the case of the beans, because there, even the whole night and the whole day is not sufficient. Those beans take a long time. That's the overnight and the overday, and you got to leave it for a long time. That's why we said that's considered shemichata even for the whole Shabbos. But for like a regular pot of raw meat, then it's not a problem about shemichata, because for the night you're not going to look at it, and for the day it's going to be ready. Now, so too, ubashal, the other pot over here we have here on this oven. If it's totally cooked, which, as Tais explains, meaning that's even if it's, we'll talk about a different daf of what's called kameichel ben drusoi, which is a machlekes a paiskim, a third cooked, a half a cooked. But if it's totally cooked, shaper dummy, then it's going to be okay to leave it also on the pot, because you don't need to be mechata. Why would I stir the coals? It's totally cooked. I'm not going to stir the coals. But when did we say it's a problem? Is bashal b'lei bashal. If it's cooked but not cooked, partially cooked, that's the case of asur. That you cannot put onto the fire right before Shabbos, because you have the Friday night meal an hour later, and you say, oh, it's not ready, and you come to stir the coals. That's the case of shemichata. Now, but as the Gemara adds on, that let's say vishad beigar machaya. Let's say even into a pot which is partially cooked, you add in right before Shabbos a piece of raw meat. Now you're not going to eat that dish tonight anymore because you have that raw piece of meat inside of it there. Shaper dummy, that's a heter way of of permitting it to be sitting there without a blech, because you're not going to eat it tonight anymore because you threw in the raw piece of meat, and therefore it's permitted to leave it on the oven. But now the Gemara says, now that the master said, meaning we said before in the concept, let's say we introduced it because of a nitzi pishtim. We said, kol midi de kasher leizika, anything that's harmful for it, the wind, like by the bundles of flax, we said loy megali, you're not going to uncover it. So here we get into a bit of a discussion. We're going to be talking about, as Taisa explains, these cases start talking about roasting on Shabbos. Roasting on Shabbos is different than the case that we said up until now. We just said a moment ago regarding bishul on Shabbos, that raw food is not a problem because it's not going to be ready by tonight. You're not going to be mechata, and by tomorrow it's going to be ready. So that you could actually leave it like that. Here we're talking about roasting. Roasting, we are concerned shem yechata, even with raw food. Now, what's important to understand is the Gemara is going to list two factors for Isser and two factors for Heter, meaning there's two factors that would say that would be forbidden to leave the food in the oven, and there's going to be two factors of Heter to permit leaving the food in the oven. What are the two factors of Heter? If it's kid goat, young meat, it's harmful to open up the oven when it's cooking because it's going to, the wind, the draft, would ruin the tenderness of the meat. Additionally, if it's visharik, if the oven is sealed, so then there's another reason why we would say you're allowed to leave it on the fire, because you're not going to come to break it open and open it because it's a big tircha. By the time you're doing it, you'll remember, hey, wait a second, it's Shabbos. So those two factors are to be matter. In contrast, we have two factors of Isser. When you have that of the barcha, of older goat, so that doesn't get ruined. It's tough meat anyway. If you open up the oven and the draft would come in, it wouldn't ruin it. So therefore, that's another consideration why we should make it forbidden. Additionally, if v'lo sharik, the oven's not sealed, it's very easy to open it up. We don't want to let you do that from before Shabbos because you might quickly and easily, you're not thinking about opening up the oven because it's not going to get ruined. And also, it's so easy, you might just come to stir the coals. So those are two factors for Isser. So let's now start the discussion. Says the Gemara. Now that the master said, anything that wind is harmful for it, like we said by the bundles of flax. You're not going to open up the oven. So says the Gemara like this. Hi bisr the gadyam, the meat of a kid goat, which again, like we said, that the wind, a draft is harmful for it, and visharik, and the opening of the oven is sealed with mud, with cement around it. So it's not quickly. You're not going to be readily stirring the coals because the coals were inside the oven. So Shabbadami, that case you're allowed to leave on the oven from before Shabbos because you have two factors working in its favor. One is that it's kid goat, which you don't want to really open up because it can get ruined, and also because it's sealed. Now the barcha, that of a large ram. Let's say now that we're talking about the case of two factors leisser. If you have a large ram, which the wind is not harmful for it, v'lo sharik, and it's also not sealed. So it's very easily opening up the oven to take it off to go and stir the coals. Also, that's going to be forbidden to leave on from before Shabbos. But now we get a machlekes. Let's say you only have one factor in pro and one factor in con. Let's say you have the gad yibalei shark. Let's say you have a kid goat. So that's a reason to say why it would be permitted, but the oven's not sealed. Or the barch of a shark. Or you have that of an older goat or a ram where it's not going to get ruined, but the oven is sealed. So you have one factor saying usser, one factor saying heter. So it's a machlekes. Vashi says, Shari says, permitted. Rabbi Yirmi Medifti Asi says it's going to be forbidden. So now the Gemara asked, Rav Ashi, the Sharkon Rav Ashi says that it's permitted, that you're allowed to leave it in the oven, even though that it's an adult goat. And the Gemara says, Vatnan. We learned in the Mishnah on the next daf, your Testament base, says, and this is the case that we're talking about of tzliya, as Taisa explains, we're talking about cases of roasting. Ain't tzolim basi, not allowed to roast meat, or batzal, or an onion, or bay, or an egg, only if it can be roasted from before Shabbos. What do you mean? Why can't you roast it? According to Rav Ashi, all types of meat, even adult even adult goats, even what type of meat it is, you're allowed to roast it from before Shabbos. It doesn't have to be roasted from before Shabbos. How do we understand this halacha? Says, you want to know Hasam over there, it's the barcha, it's talking about a ram, v'lo sharik, and it's not even sealed the oven. He only permitted all types of meat if the oven's sealed. Or if it's not sealed, then that of a kid goat. Here, where the Mishnah says you're not allowed to roast the meat unless you roast them before Shabbos, has to be talking about the case of that it's the barcha and it's lo shark. And there, in that case, when both are leisser, he agrees that it's going to be aser. That's one version of that discussion. Ikitami, those that say, and actually the halacha follows like this first opinion of this machlekes, the gadya, the meat of a kid goat. Bain sharik, whether the oven is sealed. Bain loy sharik, whether the oven is not sealed. So you only have one one thing of heter, where it's just of a kid goat, Shabbat dummy, actually everyone agrees that it's going to be permitted. Why? Because since the wind, the draft would be harmful, even though it's not sealed, everyone's going to agree that it's going to be permitted to leave it in the oven before Shabbos. So to the other way, the barchanami, even if it's ram, which is tougher meat, but visharik if the oven is sealed, Shabbat dummy, everyone's going to agree that it's going to be permitted because you still have one maila, that it's a tircha to break it open. By the time you're breaking it open, even though you're not concerned about the draft, you're going to remember that it's Shabbos, and therefore we let you leave it on the oven before Shabbos. Ki pligi, their whole machlekes was, if you have both le'isr, the barcha, if it's from ram meat, v'lo shark and oven's not sealed, that's where their machlekes was. The Rav Ashi says permitted. Why is it permitted? It's the ram meat and it's not sealed because ultimately it's covered. Since it's covered, you're still going to remember, and therefore he says you're allowed to leave it on the oven from before Shabbos. Rav Yomi Difti also says forbidden because you have two factors saying le'isr. Now on this version, the Gemara asks Rav Ashi, the shari that he says permitted all types of meat in all types of ovens. But, and the Gemara says, Vatsanan in the Mishnah on the next daf, ain't selling basar, but you're not allowed to roast meat, which is the case we're asking from, onions and eggs. El Kadesh should tell me about unless it's roasted from before Shabbos. Why? What do you mean? You can put it on right before Shabbos. Even roasting that it can be ready for the Friday night meal, we're not concerned because he holds it as long as it's covered, even though it's not sealed, and even though it's tougher meat, he holds you allowed to do it. Isn't that contradicting from the Mishnah? So the Gemara, no, Hasim over there, the bisra agumri. We're talking about meat on the open coals, which are not in the oven at all. So it's not even covered. Forget about sealed, it's not even covered, and therefore that's so easy. When you see it right there, the shish kebab, it's grilling right there, you just move your finger, you already stoke the coals. That's the case that the Mishnah on the next step is talking about, where even called Rav Ashi, that's so easy that we're concerned that Shemi Chata, that you're going to come to stoke the coals. So the Gemara continues, Amar Ravina, he says, based on everything we said up until now, he says, Hai karachaya, says raw pumpkin, raw squash, Shabbat dummy, you're allowed to put on the fire right before Shabbos. Why? Keeping the kasher zika, since if you would open up the pot, the draft that would come in would ruin the squash that's cooking. So kibisr the gad dummy, it's like the meat of a kid goat, which we said that the draft would be harmful for it, and we said therefore if you opened it up, it would ruin it. You wouldn't open it up, and therefore there's no concern shemichata. So the raw squash is the same thing. Now we continue to the next halacha of the Mishnah. Beishami Ayman, they said another thing you're not allowed to do on Erev Shabbos that's going to continue into Shabbos is a meicher, and you're not allowed to sell to a non-Jew Erev Shabbos unless, as our Gemara is going to explain this halacha, but Basil said it's permitted. So turn in the Brisa that elaborates on this machlekes. Beishami Ayman, they say lo yimka adam chevtzel anachri, you're not allowed to sell an object to a non-Jew. V'lo yishalenu, you're not allowed to lend it to him. V'lo yilenu, you're not allowed to lend it to him. Which she'ela is a lending that you get back the actual thing itself. Halva, a loan, is something that is meant to be spent, and you get back other money in its place. But they're both lending. Neither are you allowed to give him a gift. Ella, kadeshi agia. Only if the non-Jew could reach labeisai to his house when it's still before Shabbos. So although really the non-Jew is doing it for himself, Beishama was stringent because it might be confused with the that it looks like this, and this is how Tais agrees to Rashi, that it might look like his shliach. Because he's loading him up. Everyone's watching. Wait a second. I see the Jew giving this, the non-Jew's going out. Shabbos. So it looks like his agent. So although really he's doing it for himself, the non-Jew's taking it. It's a gift or a loan. Still, it's a promise to Beishama. If he can't get home, it looks like he's doing an agency for a Jew, and that's forbidden. Beisill say, no, that Kadeshi Gila Baisa Samach L'chaima. As long as he can get to the house that's closest to the wall of the other city where the non-Jew lives, since he could put it down over there because he got to the city, even though it's not even going to be his house, let's say his house is another mile further, but as long as he can get to the house, that's the closest house by the city walls, that's sufficient. Rabbi Kiva, he says, no, even Kadeshi, and the halacha falls like Rabbi Kiva, Kadeshi Yetzim Pesach Beisai. As long as he leaves the opening of the house of the Jew, it's good. As long as he got out of that Jew's house before Shabbos starts, it's okay. You could give this gift or sale or loan to the non-Jew before Shabbos. Now, Amar B'Yisrael Yehuda, he explains. He says, Hein Hein Divri Rabbi Kiva, Hein Hein Divri Beisil. The words of Rabbi Kiva is really the words of the Beisil. Rabbi Kiva is only coming to El Lefarish Divri Beisil. He's only coming to explain the opinion of Beisil, meaning Rabbi Kiva is not coming to disagree with Beisil. He's coming to disagree with the Tanakama, who was his disputant, according to Beisil. The Tanakama said, according to Beis Hillel, that yes, you also have to make sure he gets somewhere, but just he doesn't have to get like Bishami to the non-Jew's actual house, just to the house that's the closest one of the city walls where the non-Jew lives in. But he come and say, no, Beis Hillel does not say like that. Beis Hillel is actually holds that as long as you get out of the house, that's enough, and we don't have this Isser that Bishami talks about. Now, one more last machlokes, which is very similar to the idea we just said, between Bishami and Beis Hillel, Tarmon Luna Brisa. Beishami and the Beishami say, Lo yimka adam chebtzei lo nachri. A person should not sell his chametz. Very apropos halacha now. A person not allowed to sell his chametz, his leavening to a non-Jew. Unless he knows that the non-Jew is going to consume it before Pesach, because you cannot go ahead and give him something which you know is going to be continuing on Pesach. Similar idea where, even though it's really for him, it's his own thing, but you're not allowed to sell him before Shabbos. Says Beis Shammai, same thing as you cannot sell him before Pesach unless you know he's going to consume before Pesach. Well, Bisil, I mean, the halacha falls like Bisil. No, because man shemutel achle, it could be erev Pesach. As long as you're still allowed to eat the chametz, mutel achle, you're allowed to sell it to the non-Jew. Now, Yehuda, he says, as you continue top of your testament, he says kutach habavli, which is a famous Babylonian dip called the kutach dip, which they would put in some spoiled sour bread. They would put in with chametz, as the Gemara says in Perek Ele Oivrim. They would put that into the dip. Now, the kutach dip was not eaten at one shot. It was dipped into, and it would stay for a long time, that dip. Or v'chamani kutach, or all types of kutach. Also, limka lama yem, because Pesach says, you now sell that dip 30 days before Pesach to a non-Jew. Why 30 days? Because 30 days before is when we start expounding the halachas of Pesach, and that's when the prohibitions of Pesach takes effect on the person. And therefore, like Beis Shammai, where you have to know that it's going to be consumed before Pesach, so it says that you're not allowed to sell it 30 days before Pesach, because then that's when the Issa already starts, and since you know it's going to be held on to him, so then you're in violation. But again, the halacha does not fall like that. Halacha falls like Basil. As long as you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to sell the chametz to the non-Jew. Some of these we spoke about in today's Daf, Masech Shabbos on Daf Yomi, was we had many different machlokes between Beis Shammai and Hillel regarding Erev Shabbos before it gets dark. And we explained from Taisus that not all the same Isurim, but those are the exact cases that we're discussing regarding Erev Shabbos before it gets dark. Question was, first case was in the Mishnah where the machlokes, if you let us soak the dye from before Shabbos, which that's what would be called as the malach of lush. So if your machlokes is if you're allowed to do this from before Shabbos and then continue into Shabbos, obviously, as a later Gemara is going to explain, that on Shabbos itself would be asur that you'd be chayav achatas. Now, who's the Tana of our Mishnah that holds that just putting in the water is the soaking, meaning that this is the violation of lush? Isn't that like Rebbe? Because we have a brisa that is machlokes Rebbe Mir Yehuda. If you go ahead and you soak something, if that's going to be the violation, or do you have to actually knead it? So that says the Gemara. No, you could even say the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yasi. What's with the case of Afar, that he says you have to actually knead it? Well, that's Bar Gibel. If it's kneadable, then he holds you have to actually knead it. Whereas in the case of the Mishnah, by Diyai, or like we said in the Gemara, the case of Afer, where it's not kneadable, Rabbi Yasi would agree that putting in the water itself would be a violation of the malacha of lush, because it's not kneadable. If it's not kneadable, even he agrees that not kneading is just putting in the water is going to be the violation, and therefore Abaye says the halacha of the Mishnah could be not only like Rebbe, even like Rabbi Yehuda. Then we went to a brayso that had many halachas regarding that you're allowed to do certain things Erev Shabbos, that's going to go the whole Shabbos. For example, digging irrigation canals. We had the case of mugmer, which is the case of the incense underneath the clothing. We had the gofris, sulfurizing underneath the vessels. We had the keeler, a type of ointment for the eye. We had ispalanis, which is a type of a medication, a dressing for a wound. Those you're allowed to do, even though the malach is going to be doing all Shabbos, the malach is going to be going, it's still going to be permitted. But this was the case that threw everything off. But the wheat in the watermill, that's going to be asur. Why is that asur? Why is it any different than the case of the Reisha? It's the same thing. You started something before Shabbos, go through all Shabbos. So one pshat Rabbah said is that because it's going to make noise, which is a very common halacha on Shabbos known as avshemilsa, zilusa, having the dryer going on Shabbos and making noise. That's a disgrace for Shabbos. So the mill is you're having the Shabbos Suda and it's making noise. That's disgraceful. We call it not Shabbos, and that's why it's going to be asur. Rabbi Yosef said that actually it's prohibited because of shvisas kelim, because your keli is doing something and doing malacha of grinding on Shabbos. Now, it was obvious from Rabbi Yosef that this brisa, which is saying a prohibition of shvisas kelim, is like Beis Hillel, because what's all the case of the Reisha that said you're allowed to start these things malachas from before Shabbos? That's not like Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai says that you're not allowed to start things from before Shabbos. So then the problem is, then how do we understand the case of the Reisha? Why are they not a problem of shvisas kelim? You tell me Beis Hillel agrees to shvisas kelim. Why are they not a problem? Why all these cases of Gufris and Mugmer, and I'm doing an eraser here. Why all these not a problem of Shvisis Kalim? Says the Gemara, because all those cases are Delay Kavod Maisa. Here by, let's say, the Mugmer or the Gufris, what happens is the Keli that it's in is totally passive. So therefore, it didn't do an action. That's why it's permitted. Whereas here, by the mill is turning, is doing an action. That's why it's asa. And even the traps we said, like the fish hooks, they're not doing an action. They're totally passive. That's why Basil says that it's going to be mutter. Then, however, the Gemara introduced Rav Ashi. He says that actually, no. The one who holds that Shvisis Kalim is aser is only going to be Beis Shammai. He's the Tana that holds it's forbidden. Basil holds it permitted, and either one of these opinions holds no difference if you're doing a mais or not. Beis Shammai holds they're both going to be aser, whether it's doing a mais or not. Basil says both are going to be mutter. Now, so then the question becomes, according to Beis Shammai, why is it mutter to do, let's say, mugmer or gufris, even if it's not doing the action? He holds you not to have your vessel part of a malacha. So and that is because it's on the ground. Therefore, the coals are not in a kli, and therefore no keli is doing malacha. But what do you do with every practical household thing? You have your barrel that's beer is fermenting the beer. That's doing malacha at Shabbos. What's with your lamp? Your lamp is doing a havara. How about your pot is cooking? How about your spit? So it says the Gemara, according to Beis Shammai, you have to say afkur mafkur, that he declared ownless. Not mine. No shvisis kalim. That's why according to Beis Shammai, you have to say it's mutter. Now, then the Gemara brought a seemingly related case, at least, that it is going to be usher even according to Beis Hill. Not because of Shvisis Kalim. What were the cases? We had the case of, let's say, putting the beans, you're not allowed to put an Erev Shabbos, or the barrel of water that the baker needs, which has to cook for a long time. Now, and even if you do it, there's an important halacha we'll see on other dafim of Isra B'chdei Sheyasa. You're going to have to wait much Shabbos amount of time that you violated by having it cooking on Shabbos. So he said it's not because of Shvisis Kalim, and it's going like Beis Hill. Why? So this is a new idea of Gizer Shemechat B'Gechal. You might come to stoke the coals, and that's why, according to Beis Hill, these beans take a long time to cook. Or this water also has to cook for a long time. Because of that, Beis Hill would agree, not put Erev Shabbos. Not because Shvisis Kalim. No problem about Shvisis Kalim. But the problem is, you might come to stir the coals, and that's why it's been. Then the Gemara says, once we introduce this idea of Shemichad B'Gechalim, now we have a difficulty. You just told me Sil agrees to Shemichad B'Gechalim. What's with all these other cases of the Mishnah? Why, if they're on coals, are you not concerned over there if the process is going all Shabbos and you might come to stir the coals on Shabbos? What's with Mugma and Gafris? Says the Gemara, no, that's not a problem. Why? Because if you stir the coals, there's going to be smoke. And the smoke is actually going to ruin the clothing, ruin the vessels. You're not going to stir the coals. Well, what's with the bundles of flax? You're going to stoke the flame so that it should really get heated up. The flax, they roast. So the wind, the draft is harmful for it, and therefore you're not going to come to do that. Well, what's with the wool in the vat? That you're right. That wouldn't get ruined, but it's talking about that it's removed from the flame. And what's with Megis? But what's with, okay, it's off the flame, but what's with you might come to mix it? No, we're talking about that the oven is sealed. And therefore, you're not, by the time you're going to come to do that, you're going to remember, and then you're not going to come to do that. And therefore, that case is also going to be permitted. Now, once we introduced this idea, we said that you tell me there's certain types of things that you're not going to be mechata. So there's also a heter, the laws of Bishul and Shabbos, what's called a raw pot of meat. Or even, we said, even if just one piece of raw meat that's thrown into a pot. Since it's not going to be fit for the evening, so you're not going to think about it. And you're not going to become a mechata because the night meal is not going to be ready anyway. The morning meal is going to be ready anyway. So there actually is no problem about leaving it without a blech because you're not going to be mechata with it. So to be said, if it's totally cooked, also you're not going to be mechata because it's ready. Why would I cook it more? Why would I burn the food? And also the concern is only, like we said, by if it's only partially cooked. Bashal v'loy bashal. That's where we have the chashash of shemi chata. Then the Gemara continues with two versions of the machlekes, which are regarding these two elements we spoke about. One is kid meat. That's a reason to say that it's mutter because a draft is harmful for it. Another reason of heter is if it's sealed, because it takes an effort to open, you're going to recall. And therefore, those are two reasons why it'd be mutter. We had two different versions. First version, everyone held that if it's tula heter, it's going to be mutter. Tula eser, it's going to be aser. The only thing was, machlekes regarding if it has one heter, one eser. The second version said that no, Actually, everyone agrees even just one leheter is going to be enough. But when we had Rav Ashi who says even if both leisser, even if barcha v'lo sharik, still going to be mutter. So he said based on that, according to that one opinion, Rav Ashi in the second version, actually this question was on both versions. We're going to explain for both versions. How do you explain the Mishnah next daf? You're not allowed to roast meat. And we said the case we're discussing are roasting only if it's roasted from before Shabbos. Why? You can put on even if it's raw from right before Shabbos. So for the first version, you have to say that it's the ram meat, and it wasn't sealed. So you have two le'isr, where according to the first version, Rav Ashi agrees. But this is according to the second version, that he says even if two le'isr is still going to be mutter, must be talking about that it's the meat on coals. Then it's so accessible and it's not going to get ruined, then he would agree that then it's going to be asr because of Shema, Yechata. Even Rav Ashi would agree over there. That's the Mishnah on the next daf. Then we continue with the halacha of our Mishnah, Machlekes Beishama still regarding selling, lending to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbos. So Beishama says, has to be that he has to be able to get to his house. Basil says, as we saw two versions of the Machlekes, one version Basil said as long as he gets to the house of the beginning of his city. And then Rabbi Kiva's version was that it's Kadesh Yetzim and Pesach Beis, which Allah follows as long as he gets out of the Jew's house. And then we had a similar machlekes regarding selling chametz 30 days before Pesach, according to Beis Shammai. You can't sell unless you know he's going to consume it. Therefore, let's say by the Kutach Habavli, where it takes a long time, you can't sell it 30 days before because that's when the Isra of Pesach starts. According to Basil, as long as you could still eat on Erev Pesach, you're still allowed to sell it to the non-Jew. Thank you to any time and everyone else for joining us and hosting us.